Hi Year 10, Mr. Tapley here for your next lesson of Year 10 Geography. This lesson we are looking at developing our understanding and our skills using scatter graphs, one of the tools you will use in geography, and identifying interconnection between well-being factors. That's a very common theme throughout geography, is that everything is connected. So everything outside of your window, in the environment. Last term we looked at the connection between human actions and the natural environment. And in geography, you can measure interconnection between well-being factors by looking at scatter graphs, so visual representations of data. So our success criteria is to be able to successfully interpret, so to read them, to summarize, to describe them, and then to create our own scatter graphs using the Gapminder digital graphing tool. So because we're on remote learning, I can't have you really just draw a scatter graph and then take a photo of it and upload it to Compass or something. That'd be awful. But fortunately, there is a very useful digital graphing tool that we've actually used in the past very briefly. So I'll show you how to use that in more detail today. So, to improve human well-being, which should be our ultimate goal really, to improve everyone's health and happiness, it is important to understand well-being factors, but also how these are connected to each other. So how does our health impact our wealth and vice versa? We can't improve our health, our life expectancy, if we don't understand the other well-being factors that are impacting it. So even if I give you a lot of medicine, if you don't have any money to afford food, you're not going to be healthy. So we need to understand the connections between well-being factors. Creating and interpreting scatter graphs, or really any other type of graph, can identify this interconnection. A scatter graph shows the relationship between two sets of data, so two variables. If the data is connected, we refer to this as correlation or related. For example, in this graph measuring height and arm span, we can see that arm span is connected to height. So the general pattern is the taller you are, the longer your arms. So you would say that those two sets of data, those two variables, are correlated or related. You might have looked at this kind of stuff actually in maths or even science. In the scatter graph we examined for our Gapminder activity last term, you can see the two well-being factors, GDP versus life expectancy, are correlated. So all of the dots going up and across follow this same line. They're all trending upwards, that diagonal direction. So GDP and life expectancy are correlated. There is a clear pattern. As income increases, health improves. A scatter graph helps us identify where and how to improve human well-being in a visual representation of information. So government officials can look at this and then they can implement programs, welfare benefits. Doctors can look at this. They can make recommendations. So this sort of data is very, very, very useful for improving our human well-being around the world. In this example on the right here, you've got the daily temperature versus the number of visitors at the beach. In this example, the data points follow a similar pattern or trend. So all the values are increasing in a level line. If I had some sort of drawing tool, I'd just be able to just go zoom and draw a line straight through the middle of that. This demonstrates correlation. So the factors are connected. So if all the factors, all the little dots on the graph are all bunched up and moving together in that same line, it's connected. When interpreting scatter graphs, you need to identify the type of correlation. Create the graph using your data and then create a line of best fit or average, using this to identify what correlation is there. So it's the pattern, positive, negative, strong, or weak, the specific values, and any values that do not fit your pattern. So you can see here we're measuring, very hard to read, but maths marks and English marks. So the general pattern, if I draw through this line, is that as my math score increases, my English score increases. That wouldn't be true for me. I was alright at English, but I was terrible at math. So there are different types of correlation, as I hinted at in the last slide. So what we've mostly been looking at is positive correlation. So as this increases, that increases. So all the lines, all the dots go that way. You can also have negative correlation. So the pattern or the trend is decreasing and moving down. So negative correlation. You can have no correlation. So some graphs, there just won't be a perfect line where all the factors are grouped up in a perfect little line. You might have no correlation. It just looks like the dots are all random and chaotic. Or very rarely, you will have perfect correlation, this one here, where all the factors are completely connected. This is also called causation. So not only are they related, but they are the direct cause, the only cause of those two factors. So what we're doing this lesson is using the Gapminder tool website to create and interpret a scatter graph measuring two well-being factors. So connecting to what we've looked at over the past couple of lessons, human well-being, you're going to be looking at two well-being factors of your choice. I've given you a few examples, so literacy, life expectancy, access to water, etc., etc. And then what you're going to do is use Gapminder to create the graph. In your digital notebook, you're just going to copy and paste a screenshot or an image of that graph, and then you need to write a PQE paragraph, just one paragraph, summarizing the information and then the correlation of the well-being factors. So what does that graph tell me? And are the two well-being factors you've selected connected? Are they related? I've also added the PQE slides from term 3 to the end of this lesson. I'm not going to go through them all again because I've done it before. If you really need some extra help, you can go through the video from last term where I explained PQE. But I thought I'd just add those slides to the presentation for those of you that need some extra revision, some extra support. So what you need to do is use that website. That'll take you here to Gapminder. And you can see it's already given us a graph that I've used in the slides. So you can't use this one, but it's measuring income versus life expectancy. And as you can see, all of these dots, different countries, are moving up in a nice little line there. So I would say those two factors are correlated. They are related, they are connected. So the amount of money you make is impacting your life expectancy. So wealth is impacting your health. What you need to do is if you click on these factors, you get a list of different well-being factors, different variables to measure. So let's say, for example, I measure, let's go for education, literacy, so ability to read and write, and I'm going to look for adult total. This one isn't as clear as the past one. So you could say that there is some slight correlation, or you could even say that the correlation is not present. So you could say no correlation, just comparing it to what we have on this slide. Let's say if I measure literacy rate versus, let's go population, total population. Okay, so that one's interesting. I'd say that's no correlation. What's over here? India. Okay, then that's interesting. So the amount of people who can read and write in the country versus the population of the country. Interesting. Anyway, so that's what you're doing this lesson. You're just using Gapminder to make a graph. At this point, I'd take a screenshot of the graph, and then in my digital notebook, I'd copy that photo in, and then I'd write one PQE paragraph describing the information within the graph. So what is the pattern? So for this one, I'd say the pattern is the higher your, it looks like the most of the countries up here are very, very tiny actually. So literacy rate versus population. What is the pattern? Few quantities, so drop in some names and numbers. So for example, India is a population of 1.25 billion and literacy rate of 62.8. And then the exception to this pattern that I have is probably India as well, actually. Anyway, so that's what you're doing this lesson, guys. If you have any questions or concerns about that, please let me know. Otherwise, best of luck. Hope you're well, and cheers.